Joining us now is Senator Jeanne Shaheen, the top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure.
What do you make of this deal that President Zelensky has been asked to sign regarding mineral resources? Is that the answer to bringing this war to an end?
We had a chance to speak with President Zelensky about this critical minerals deal that the United States gave him. He was concerned that he hadn't had a chance to read it completely and wasn't sure about the ramifications of it. About 40 to 50% of the critical minerals that are identified there are in Russian-occupied territory. Much of it is owned by one oligarch in Ukraine. But I assume that it should be on the table for any negotiations around a peace deal, but it needs to be something that assures the Ukrainians that if they're going to partner with the United States on these critical minerals, that they get some security guarantees against any future Russian efforts to invade the country again. So I think it should be part of any negotiated agreement, but for us to say to the Ukrainians, we're going to take your minerals, I think is not the best way to negotiate.
National Security Advisor Mike Waltz brushed off questions today about President Trump calling Zelensky a dictator and said Trump's frustration with President Zelensky was multifold. Secretary Waltz said that Zelensky needs to come back to the table, but Zelensky, who was not invited to talks between Russia and the U.S. earlier this week, said that he would not sign any deal that Ukraine was not a part of negotiating. How do you see this playing out?
Well, the United States has been sending a really mixed message to Ukraine and to the Russians and to Europe. In fact, I was in Munich last weekend with a bipartisan delegation of senators, and what we heard was Secretary Hegseth say that NATO was not going to be on the table for Ukraine, that they needed to give away part of their territory that Russia currently occupies. They were never going to get all of that back. Vice President Vance walked those remarks back when he did an interview the following day and said basically everything is on the table, including boots on the ground from the U.S.
And because you were just overseas there in Ukraine, can you share with us what you saw on the front lines, the overall sentiment toward the U.S. right now?
Well, there was a lot of concern about what President Trump is going to try and have the United States do in response to the war there. What we saw from the Ukrainians, and we visited an electricity site where they've been very creative in defending their site. And what we saw everywhere we went was the courage of the Ukrainian people, the resilience of the Ukrainians who were keeping their economy and their country going despite the war, and a real commitment to defend their freedom and their country against all the odds.
You have said there is strong bipartisan support to help Ukraine, but to also hold Russia and Vladimir Putin accountable. How does that happen, given the relationship we've seen between Presidents Trump and Putin?
Well, one of the places we visited was the suburb of Bucha outside of Kyiv, where the Russians were stopped, but they held that community hostage in a siege for 33 days. They indiscriminately killed civilians. Over 500 people were killed. They committed atrocities, rape, and torture. And we cannot let Putin think that he can get away with that.
Lastly, on a different note, the Senate narrowly confirmed Kash Patel to lead the FBI today. Not a single Democrat voted for him, including you. Why not?
Well, because I think the leader of the FBI, as Chris Wray has been, should be apolitical, should be focused on the role that the FBI should play in fighting crimes and fighting against drug lords who are trying to bring fentanyl and other drugs into this country, who are going to be working hard despite political differences in this country. I don't think Kash Patel meets that bar. What he has done since in the last 4 years is talk about retribution against his enemies.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.